Hey, Stephen.
Right.
Touche.
Shall we? Well, welcome everybody. Hi, I'm Bob Wolf, Chair of SPICE. And on behalf of the SPICE Committee and the Program Subcommittee, I'd like to welcome all of you to the 6th program in our fall series. For those who missed any of the prior programs, you can find the video recordings of them on the SPICE homepage. All you have to do is go to templebethel.org, choose the top menu item, Get Involved, and click on Seniors. Good news, shortly you're going to receive an email letter announcing both the winter lineup for SPICE programming via Zoom and the return of a favorite SPICE-sponsored 5-month learning experience, Sage. January SPICE kicks off with Zoom at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, the 6th of January, with Dr. Dan Murrill talking about Charlotte's most desirable neighborhoods and their development, Myers Park, Dilworth, and Eastover. And this will be followed by Rabbi Beth Nichols on Tuesday, and I stress Tuesday, January 19th. The 20th is Inauguration Day, at 11 o'clock, speaking on the Star of David, a complicated history. Now, Sage, which we had unfortunately for a variety of reasons to put on hold for about a year and a half, we're just really, really glad to see this back. For those of you who aren't aware of what Sage is, it's a multi-month program learning on a single topic, an in-depth dive, and it usually follows a format of talk by the rabbi and others, followed by breakout rooms, and followed by getting back together as a single group and discussing what we've learned. We get material in the mail a week to 2 in advance of each session, and then there's some special questions for the breakout room, which is given out when it occurs. I would ask each of you, if you're interested, to please register and register individually, because we need to count individuals, even though you may have multiple people calling from the same Zoom connection. This is going to be limited in the number of people, so I strongly suggest once you get the information, go up on SchuleCloud and register for it. It's really, really going to be worthwhile. This year, as I said, it'll be the 4th Friday of every month starting in January, and it will be, Wednesday of every month, and will be led by Rabbi Asher Knight and also Donna Tarnay from the Green Spun Center. And the topic is going to be the machinery of hate, anti-Semitism, and us. And I think all of you know the importance of this topic. We'll cover the sources of and historical sources of anti-Semitism, what it is today, and then at the end we'll have a special session on what can we all do about it. And if you have kids in college or your own dealings in the city where there's been a lot of cross currents over the past years, this is going to be a topic that is going to be a must-have. So please join in it. Before we proceed, I just want to thank, as always, Natalie Friedlander and Tracy Lederer, 2 people on the Temple staff without whom this and everything else will not be possible. So thank you, ladies. We appreciate it. And now, without further ado, because she needs no introduction, our own Rabbi Dusty Klass will speak to us on Modeh Ani, giving thanks, strengthening our gratitude muscles in a world that seems bent on atrophying. Thank you. Rabbi?
Hi, everyone. Good morning still. I am putting a couple of questions in the chat box so that you can see them. And I want you to not answer them, but I want you to be thinking about them. Do you best receive here? Okay, so there are a few questions in the chat box, and they are for you to think about as we learn together today. And I believe you have some time to just spend time with each other after the official program. And it's possible that these might be some things you choose to talk about, but perhaps they won't be, who knows? I want to begin by telling a story that I have told before, and And that will always be true of rabbis. We tell the same stories over and over and over again. I'll do it with your permission, because as it turns out, the Torah is one of those stories that we tell over and over and over again. And we seem to be okay with that. So I'm going to tell this story, which some of you have definitely heard before. In fact, I can tell you, you heard it on June 2nd, 2017, if you were at services that night. And if you weren't, then you maybe have never heard it. So here we go. It's called The Curse of Blessings. There was once a young officer of the law, a recent graduate, proud as you can imagine. He wore a clean, starched blue uniform with shiny brass buttons. His hat had one of those fancy feathers in it, and his sword was gleaming gold. He was, as they say, pretty full of himself. One day he was walking his beat and heard a commotion in an alley. He ventured into the darkness and there in the distance saw a man in rags. "Get out here and show your face," he commanded. But the man in rags did not come forward. "I am an officer of the law and I command you, come forward." The man in rags did not move. Instead, he just shifted his weight from one foot to the other and spoke. "I don't know what I'm going to do with you." "Do with me?" the officer of the law mocked. "Do with me? You don't do with me. I do with you. I am an officer of the law, and I command you to come forward." "Ah," said the man in rags. "Now I know what to do with you." He drew his sword, and without further word, he moved to attack. The officer of the law drew his own sword in defense. "Stop that," he ordered. "Put your sword down right now." But the man in rags did not stop. The officer of the law had to parry thrusts left and right. "Stop," he said again, but to no avail. The officer of the law was forced to retreat. The man in rags was a seasoned swordsman, and it seemed he might win, but just then he lowered his guard, and what the officer of the law had intended as a parry became a thrust. His sword ran through the man in rags. "Oh no, I didn't mean that," the officer of the law said. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Why didn't you stop when I ordered you to? Why did you attack me?" The man in rags waved the words away. "I am leaving you," he said, "and as I do, I put upon you the curse of blessings. Every day you must say a new blessing, one you have never said before. On the day you do not say a new blessing, on that day you will die." The man in rags closed his eyes. The officer of the law looked about for help. There was none to be found. When he turned back, the man in rags had disappeared. He was gone. It was a dream, the officer of the law thought. It must have been a dream. I only imagined it. It was late, the sun was setting. As much as the officer of the law tried to ignore this experience, he could not. He felt his body growing cold and knew from the chill that his life was leaving him. And in a panic, he uttered these words of blessing. "You are blessed, God, who has created such a beautiful sunset." At once, warmth and life flowed back into him. He realized with both shock and relief, the curse had been for real. The next morning, he did not delay. He woke with words of blessing. "You are blessed that you allowed me to wake up this morning." And his life felt secure the entire day. The next morning, he blessed his ability to rise from his bed. The following day, that he could tie his shoes. Day after day, he found abilities he could bless. That he could go to the bathroom, that he had teeth to brush, that each finger of his hand still worked, that he had toes on his feet and hair on his head. He blessed his clothes, every garment. He blessed his house, the roof and floor, his furniture, every table and every chair. At last, he ran out of things to bless, so he began to bless relationships. He blessed his family and friends, fellow workers, and those who worked for him. He blessed the mailman and the clerks. He was surprised to find they appreciated the blessings. His words had power. They drew family and friends closer to him. Word went out that the officer of the law was a source of blessing. Years passed, decades. The officer of the law had to go farther afield to find new sources of blessing. He blessed city councils and university buildings, scientists and their discoveries. As he traveled through the world, he became in awe of its balance and beauty and blessed that. The more he learned, the more he had to bless. His life was long, and he had the opportunity to learn in every field. He passed the age of 100. Most of his friends were long gone. His time was relegated to searching for the purpose in life and the one source from which all blessings flow. He had long since realized that he was not the source, but only the conduit. And even that realization was welcomed with a blessing that sustained him for another day. As he approached the age of Mea ve'esrim, 120, he considered that his life was long enough. Even the great saints had not lived longer. On his birthday, he made a conscious decision to utter no new blessings and allow his life to come to an end. Still, he could recite old blessings, and throughout the day he reviewed them, all the blessings for his body and his possessions, for relationships that spread throughout the world, for the awesome beauty and balance of creation, and for the deep resonance, the pulse of purpose that pervaded his very being. But no new blessing passed his lips. As the sun was setting, a chill progressed inward from his extremities. He did not resist it. In the twilight, a figure appeared, the man in rags. "You!" the officer of the law exclaimed. "I have thought about you every day for 100 years. I never meant to harm you. Please forgive me." "You don't understand," said the man in rags. "You don't know who I am, do you? I'm Elijah. I was sent 100 years ago to take your soul back to God, but when I looked at you so pompous and proud, there was no soul to take. An empty uniform was all I saw. So I put upon you the curse of blessings, and now look what you've become." The officer of the law grasped in an instant all that had happened and why. Overwhelmed, he said, "I feel blessed, dear God, that you have kept me alive and sustained me so I could attain this moment of insight." "Now look what you've done," the man in rags said in frustration. "A new blessing." Life flowed back into the officer of the law, and he and the man in rags looked to each other, neither of them knowing quite what to do. It's not a short story, so I tried to say it quickly, but I couldn't resist but retell this story as I talk about gratitude and about blessings. I think it fits so well with our topic today. I'll go ahead and share my screen so you can see my PowerPoint. Let's make it big enough for everybody to actually see. And present. All right, so gratitude. This is something that I feel like I must have known at some point, but as I was researching for today, I rediscovered it and wanted to make sure we all knew to be a Jewish person is to have gratitude in our ancestral DNA. We are called the people of gratitude, among other things. So in Genesis, we learn Leah conceived and bore a son, and she said, "This time I will praise or thank Odeh Adonai." Therefore, she named this son Yehudah, Judah. So the word Odeh leads us to Judah. The word Judah leads us to the land of Judea, and we become known as the Jews. And that is the origin both of us as Jewish people in name, and also with this connection forever between gratitude and who we are as people. And Rashi's comment on this verse is, "Because I have received more than my share," Leah had a lot of children, "from now on, I should praise God." So to receive something sends you into kind of like perpetual blessing mode. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, alav shalom, spoke to the things that one should be grateful for and when one should be grateful, and he comments on this verse in Deuteronomy, "Ve'achalta v'savata uvarachta," and you shall eat, and you shall be satisfied, and you shall bless. And Rabbi Sachs writes, good things, says Moses, will happen to you. Everything will depend, however, on how you respond. Either you will eat and be satisfied and bless God, remembering that all things come from God, or you will eat and be satisfied and forget to whom you owe all of this. You will think it comes entirely from your own efforts. It may seem a small difference, but Moses says it will make all the difference. And the text he's speaking about, the Rabbi Sachs is speaking about, is this warning that Moses offers the people that once they enter the land, they may forget from whence they came, and take all of what the land has to offer without offering gratitude for that abundance. And Rabbi Sachs writes, Moses's argument is brilliant and counterintuitive. You may think that the hard times are behind you. You have wandered for 40 years without a home. There were times when you had no water, no food. You were exposed to the elements. You were attacked by your enemies. You may think this was the test of your strength. It was not. The real challenge is not poverty, but affluence, not slavery, but freedom, not homelessness, but home. And there's a teaching that that speaks to this as well, that we I'm forgetting the psychologist who came up with this concept, but on the psychology of happiness, someone talks about, Daniel Gilbert is sounding like the right name, but I definitely made that up. So somebody will find it at some point, or I'll share it with you if I find it myself. He talked about something called the empathy gap. And the idea of the empathy gap is that those who rely on other human beings for basic needs naturally have more empathy for other human beings because they have to interact with each other more often. And those who have the ability to use finances to get what they need and do not actually have to rely on other human beings, do not interact with as many human beings, and have measurably less empathy for other human beings, which speaks, I think, to this idea that the real challenge is not poverty, but affluence. When you don't have the money to send your kids to be taken care of by whoever, and you have to go out to run an errand, or you have to go to work even though the kid is home from school for whatever reason, in a normal world where we're not where we are right now, you send your kids to the neighbors and you say, like, hey neighbor, I need you to watch Jimmy for a while. And your neighbor may not be the ideal person to take care of your kid, but that's who's available. And so you go, and then you know each other in a way that you wouldn't know each other otherwise. But in a world where you never have to interact with your neighbors, you may never know your neighbors. And then you don't have to care about your neighbors because you never met them. So the real challenge is not poverty, but affluence, not slavery, but freedom, not homelessness, but home, not lacking, but having, right? So how do we be grateful in a world where we have, is, I think, what Rabbi Sachs is raising. Thank you, Bob. I knew somebody would get ahead of me and figure out what I was trying to talk about. All right, so how many blessings are we talking about here? Like, how grateful are we supposed to be? I think many of you have seen this or heard this concept before, that we are supposed to offer 100 blessings a day. And the proof text there is in this in this same section of Deuteronomy, where Moses is talking to the people of Israel and says, now Israel, what does God ask of you? And this word ma, what does God, what, this word what, menachot plays with that Hebrew word and says it's not actually ma, what, it's rather me'ah, which means 100. So it's not saying, now Israel, what does God ask of you? But instead, now Israel, 100 God asks of you. So every day we are taught that we offer 100 blessings. And we have Rabbi Avigdor Miller, who argues that we should in fact make a career out of counting your blessings. That there are things everyone enjoys, And he argues that in particular, right, he makes an assumption about who he's talking to, your middle class and up set of people, and he pushes us, me, I'll call myself a middle class person and won't make assumptions about anybody else in this room, but as myself, a middle class person, he pushes me to figure out how to make sure I am articulating blessings at every moment that I possibly can, right? And then he enumerates all of these moments, right? He's like, if you are asleep and you wake up because a mosquito bites you and you can't get back to sleep for 10 minutes because you're busy scratching at this itch, take those 10 minutes and fill them with blessings. Or if you have insomnia and you can't get back to sleep at night, don't waste that time. He says, count your blessings. And he goes through and names all of these things. And he helps find blessings by figuring out what maladies, what ailments you don't have. So he says, if you still have your teeth, thank God for your teeth. If you don't get bad headaches all the time, thank God that you don't get bad headaches all the time. If your stomach, I'm quoting, if your stomach is normal, thank God that your stomach is normal. Who even knows what a normal stomach is anymore, particularly in the Jewish world, even actually. If you don't have allergies, right? Think about all the things people individually have to manage in their daily life. And for any one of those boxes that you don't have to check, that's an opportunity for a blessing. Now, before I continue, I'm actually curious as to what people think about that way of finding blessings. So in the chat box, I think is probably the safest place to give me your thoughts on this. As a way to find blessings, how do you feel about finding blessings by enumerating all the things that aren't wrong with you, that other people may have challenges with, and saying thank you for those things? Is that a method you have employed before? And is it a method that you like, don't like? How do you feel about it? I'll give us a second to have reactions. There's always this 5 to 30 second gap where people are typing things. And so I don't know whether anyone has had any thoughts. And then they start coming through. So Sherry says, I love the positivity, and it seems a little superficial, though I'm indeed grateful for those types of things. Ellen says, a good way to extend, I have to make my chat box big enough to actually read what people are saying. A good way to extend your gratitude exercises. Since you've always seen things you are grateful for, right? So rather than looking at finding the things that are positive, but also finding the positivity in the potential negativity, kind of like expands what you're able to be grateful for. Requires knowing what is and isn't wrong with others. Yeah, Bob, and there's some assumptions that are being made there, right? That, I often hear, just to speak to finances again, I often hear people being grateful for having the finances to whatever, but the way that they say it is like, I know other people's lives must be so hard. And what's really interesting about that is that there's all these assumptions that we then are making about what hard is, and what makes life hard or not hard. We'll come back to that in a minute. Lynn likes it too, says a great strategy that can be used when spirits start to sink. So one of the things that I'm hoping to remind you all today of, and it's a funny topic because I actually think you're all very grateful people. I experience you all as being grateful people. So I don't want to assume that you aren't already grateful, but I also know from my own experience that there are moments when it is hard to remember it is hard for me to authentically be grateful, right? There are moments when I know I'm supposed to be grateful. I know I'm supposed to be thinking of things, and yet I can't get there. And so for those moments, Lynn's suggesting this is one of those strategies that can help you be authentically grateful. Even if you can't think of anything you have, you can be grateful of the things you don't have to deal with, perhaps. Good way to start from the top and work your way down. Helps you appreciate what you have by knowing kind of what you don't have. And it is a little weird, Jerry, to find blessing that you don't have the same sufferings that others have. Yeah. Francis, do you know that you just rhymed? When I'm worried and I can't sleep, I count my blessings instead of sheep. Maybe you did that on purpose. But I really like that. It's a good little rhyme. And so Ginger, I think this was something that I was curious about as well, right? That one of the challenges to what Rabbi Miller is suggesting is that to count blessings based on things that are not bad that could be happening to you results in you thinking about a bunch of bad things anyway, which like isn't really the point of gratitude. So there's something to be said for kind of like tempering this, right? Like you don't always want to just continually go through like what other people have to deal with that you don't have to deal with. There's got to be other ways as well. Many other oh, it's a song. Okay, that's good to know. I'm noting a few people that that note that kind of like experiencing for themselves the inability to do or the illnesses that prevent them from something for a while and then regaining the ability to do those things, that also helps them be grateful. And what that speaks to me is this solution to the assumptions, right? So when you stop, you don't have to make assumptions about how hard it is to not be able to button your own buttons if you know the experience of not being able to button your own buttons and then having the experience of regaining the ability to button your own buttons. All of a sudden you have this ability to be grateful for something you never knew to be grateful for before. Okay. I'm going to keep us going. Thank you. For participating. There's something very weird to me always. This is the weirdest part about Zoom for me, is that I just want to hear all of your voices, but I also know that it makes more sense and we move forward if I don't hear all your voices, but I like want to know that any of this is interesting to you. So thank you for participating. Okay. So the other thing that we learn in Judaism is that if we're going to offer 100 blessings a day, we're going to have to get pretty specific. So here's some proof, and the Mishnah and the Talmud are very good at getting kind of very picayune, very, very specific. And so here is a good example of how to get really specific with your blessings. So the Mishnah speaks to how you recite a blessing over fruits and teaches over different fruits that grow on a tree, one recites, who creates the fruit of the tree, with the exception of wine. Although wine is produced from fruit of the tree, due to its significance, its blessing differs from other fruits of the tree. Over wine, one recites, who creates fruits of the vine. All right, so we already have a distinguisher between fruits that grow on trees and a particular fruit that grows on a particular kind of tree, which is actually a vine. But furthermore, over fruits that grow from the earth, like for example, a tapuach adama, a apple of the earth, which is Hebrew for potato, one recites, who creates fruit of the ground, with the exception of bread. Bread too is significant, and so its blessing has to differ from the other fruits of the ground. And so over bread, one recites, who brings forth bread from the earth. Over herbs and leafy vegetables, one recites, who creates fruit of the ground. Rabbi Yehuda says that there is room to distinguish between fruits that grow from the earth, herbs, and leafy vegetables. Although they are all fruit of the ground, since they have different qualities, the blessing on the latter is who creates various kinds of herbs. So if you've got herbs going on, you've got to specifically say thank you for those herbs. Then the Gemara, then the commentary comes to speak further to this, and says the Gemara returns to the issue at hand, noting that in this case it's difficult. What's unique about the common denominator between grapes and grain? And says that they possess an aspect of being offered upon the altar, right? So both wine and challah, or bread, are a component of offerings, particular offerings. Rather, it is derived from the obligation to recite a blessing upon the 7 species. After the verse speaks of the 7 species, it says, and you ve'achalta ve'savata uvarachta, and you will eat and be satisfied, and then you will bless. This is a paradigm for all other foods, that they too require a blessing. Just as the 7 species are items from which one derives benefit and require a blessing, any item, right? So now the Gemara just took this food topic that it was speaking about and blew it out into anything. Any item from which one derives benefit requires a blessing. So we talked about offering blessings for those ailments and maladies and difficulties that you don't have to deal with. You also are commanded to offer a blessing for anything at all from which you derive benefit. And here is an example of some of those things. Hang on, I'm gonna stop sharing for just a second because my screen got a little funky and I want to be able to see what I'm doing. Oh, and it's just going to be funky. Okay, so you can see that we have blessings for all sorts of things. I won't read all of them, but I highlighted them. And you've got storms and rivers, and when you build a house, and when you get good news, and when you get bad news. Anytime you see anything, right? So we've got blessings for when, blessings for moments that we don't have to deal with, for difficulty we don't have to deal with, blessings for the good things that we derive benefit from, and blessings from things we encounter in nature or in the world, right? On seeing a mountain, you offer a blessing. Now, coming from the Pacific Northwest, that makes sense to me. Mount Rainier like rises out of the mist or into the mist, depending on the day. And it's really majestic. And so it makes sense to me that upon seeing a mountain, I would offer a blessing. But some of these, on rain, again, Pacific Northwest, I'm okay with that. I really love the rain. But I know that in North Carolina, people are often less excited to have the rain arrive, and perhaps arrive for long periods of time and in pretty kind of like disastrous ways sometimes. And many of these things, storms don't always have great endings. And so the idea that we offer a blessing anyway is that's interesting. Pausing to see. Ooh, yes. Sherry, you could write the blessing for tea. So you could say a blessing thanking God for herbs if you're having herbal tea, but you can also create your own blessing. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. And Lynn, I want to note that you noted, right, that wine and bread require people in the process of their creation. And that's a huge component of what I love about particularly hamotzi, right, this blessing over bread that doesn't say thank God for fruit of the ground, right, but instead says who brings forth bread from the earth, because in there is this implication that like you don't actually bring forth bread from the earth, you bring forth like wheat, and then many of you I think probably at some point have seen wheat and know kind of all the things it takes to get from a wheat berry to the flour that turns into the bread. When I was in Bali, now what feels like a million years ago, but was really just a year and a half ago, I got to wander through the grain production, and like pick up a grain of rice, and to think about what it takes to get from zero to like fried rice at a restaurant was, like made me very happy to offer hamotzi and moments like hamotzi in my life. It takes so many things, both people and processes, to get most of the things that we encounter in our world from zero to where we can actually utilize those things. So you've seen this blessing before, Modim Anachnu Lach. It exists in our oops, sorry, that's not what I meant to do. It exists in our prayer book, and it is a blessing that you can offer every day. So Modim Anachnu Lach is known as the Hoda'ah prayer, the thank you prayer. And you have the opportunity to offer that prayer as part of the Amidah, and the Amidah is recited up to 3 times a day, every single day. And there's so many blessings within this prayer of gratitude itself that you can check off probably like 10 of your 100 blessings just in this one blessing if you'd like to. And I really like this particular interpretive version of the prayer because it speaks to the big and the small. And so I'm going to actually invite someone else to offer it again, because something weird has happened to my screen that is making it impossible for me to see the top 3 lines, but I'm confident that you all can see the top 3 lines. Would someone unmute and just read everything on this slide? And then I'm going to move to the next slide and you'll read that slide too, so that we hear the words of this prayer out loud without me not being able to see them.
I'll do it.
Awesome.
Modeh Ani, for the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations. Modeh Ani, for this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons. Modeh Ani, for the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements. Modeh Ani, for human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression. Modeh Ani, for high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared. Modeh Ani, for all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom. Modeh Ani, for human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose. Modeh Ani, we pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Blessed are you, Eternal One. Your name is goodness, and you are worthy of thanksgiving. Baruch atah Adonai hatov shimcha ulcha na'eh l'hodot.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was beautifully read. So here is what I would like to do. I'm going to go back really quickly, if I can make that happen. And I want you to just take a moment and scan these words and the words on the next page. And I want you to either to jot down in your mind or on paper which of these gratitude opportunities is speaking to you most today. So I'm going to be quiet for a full 15 seconds on this screen, and then I'm going to scoot to the next screen and just take a moment and figure out for yourself which of these gratitudes is speaking to you most today. If you had to choose just one or two. You're welcome to put them in the chat box if you'd like. Awesome. I'm going to move us forward. There is one more prayer that I wanted to offer. So I'm thankful for Haven too. So Rabbi David Wertschafter wrote a 2020 current pandemic version of this. And I just wanted to share it with you all because we are Because when we have opportunities to share new versions of prayers, I think that's a beautiful thing. So I will invite someone else, any someone else, to offer this prayer on behalf of all of us. Just unmute and have at it.
I'll do it, Dusty.
Wonderful.
Modim Anachnu Lach 2020. No one ever said that being grateful would be easy. Indeed, it can be difficult to be thankful, and I can't read that last word, who lost so much. Modim Anachnu Lach. Grateful are we to all those who have helped us to preserve this, persevere through this crisis. For doctors and nurses continuing to treat their patients, Modim Anachnu Lach. For mental and behavioral health professionals continuing to offer comfort and encouragement, Modim Anachnu Lach. For the unemployed and underemployed continuing to help their families and communities, Modim Anachnu Lach. For family and friends continuing to inquire about us, Modim Anachnu Lach. For continuing to see and hear one another remotely until we can gather in person. Modim Anachnu Lach. Baruch atah Adonai ha'atov shimcha uchana'eh lehadot. Blessed are you, Adonai. Your name inspires goodness, and your caring deserves our thanks.
Very well prayed. Thank you. So here is my question. I'll stop sharing so I can see your faces again. What would you add? What would you add to this Modim Anachnu Lach? And I encourage you to think, as we are offering these, about all of the different components of what gratitude has been spoken about in this last, 40 minutes. So how specific can you get? And what does it mean to think about what you have and also what you don't have to deal with or what you haven't had to deal with? What have you made it through that makes you understanding of gratitude that maybe you couldn't have been grateful for before? For the availability of technology to enable remote contact. Modim Anachnu Lach. For science and scientists, Modim Anachnu Lach. For the advancement of science that allowed for creation of vaccines, Modim Anachnu Lach. Yes. For family remaining safe, Modim Anachnu Lach. For Zoom. For a new tone in Washington, D.C. For those for whom that is Modim Anachnu Lach. For compassion of others during difficult times, Modim Anachnu Lach. And more and more. So there will be more. Continue to share them. For the actions of others, helping amplify the voices of the oppressed, Modim Anachnu Lach. For medicine to successfully treat specific ailments that reduces the time of people's illnesses, Modim Anachnu Lach. To feel better, do better, and be better, Modim Anachnu Lach. And more are coming into the chat. And I'm going to take a moment because I want to copy paste these questions that I offered you back into the chat box, which I'm going to have to, here we go. Okay. Thank you, Nadine. So I'm going to copy paste these questions now. And I hear that you have the opportunity to ask me questions. So we have about 10 minutes for you to ask questions. if you have any, and let's see if there are any. The questions that I came up with for myself and for all of you as I was noodling on gratitude myself was, what are the greatest blocks that you have personally experienced to feeling or expressing gratitude? So I'd love to hear from some folks on the blocks that people feel when there are blocks. I'd love for you to think about and perhaps share, if you know, right, how do you best receive or hear gratitude yourself? Because I think that one of my blocks to gratitude is actually in my own inability to hear gratitude from others toward me sometimes. I don't know if any of you have ever heard thank you and said, oh, it was no problem. That is not receipt of a thank you. That's like a deflection of a thank you. Why do we deflect thank yous? Maybe you all don't. I do. Why do I deflect thank yous? It's something worth thinking about. Okay, so Sherry's naming one block for feeling gratitude is anger or hurt. When she's feeling angry or hurt, it's hard for her to feel gratitude. Bob says ego. Yes, definitely. What other blocks do we have from feeling gratitude? Sometimes the world just sucks. I mean, I'm sure there's a much prettier way of saying that, a much more elegant way of saying that, but sometimes it's just hard. And I couldn't find this particular text for you today, but there's a text in Maimonides that teaches that when you are not physically well, you should not come to temple and try and pray. And he was not thinking about infecting other people at the time. He was thinking about whether or not you're able to fully focus on offering prayer when you have searing pain in your left ankle. Like if you are experiencing pain that is distracting you from prayer, from gratitude, from blessing, what does your blessing really mean? And so one of the things he offers is like, don't do it. Don't bless when you're not feeling able, when you're like not able to get to a genuine, authentic blessing or gratitude. And that doesn't mean you wallow, right? That means you wait and strive to find something about which you can be authentically, truly grateful. And then you are grateful for that thing. But you do not, I do not think Judaism seeks gratitude that is like a, I know I'm supposed to gratitude. Judaism seeks authentic, honest gratitude. And that might mean seeking, like that might mean spending a lot more time figuring out what you can authentically offer gratitude for in a moment. Okay, I'm seeing some answers to the questions that I offered, right? So fear of the unknown is one of the blocks. Yes. I think this is Janet, who gets lost in painting, and that kind of like helps refocus and allows for blessing to re-arrive. Doing something creative, so that also speaks, Lynn, to what Janet was speaking to as well. Sherry says, I think that when I'm in pain, I'm even more grateful because I appreciate the fact that I'm alive. Yeah, and when something is in pain, you remember to a certain extent what the world looked like before that pain and what you hope to be able to get to after that pain. And it makes you like retroactively grateful for things that you had and has the potential to like make you more grateful for the future. And it is possible to feel blessed even in pain and be thankful for other parts of your life. Okay. I am curious, does anyone have any questions about gratitude, about anything that we have learned today, about life in the world. I suppose you could ask whatever you wanted. As I say to the 7th graders when I do ask the rabbi, theoretically, you could ask me whatever you wanted. And if I feel like I have an answer, I'm happy to offer it.
Go ahead.
Just out loud?
Janice, did you have a question?
Yes. I really value this. Thank you. I have no trouble telling people I'm grateful. I have trouble taking it from other people. When I give a comment or do something or check on someone, it's not a big deal. And I don't know why I am like that, though. I'm uncomfortable when I get it back.
It's a good question. Ellen asked the same question in the chat. So I imagine it sounds like a number of us have this challenge, right? Of understanding that gratitude is really important and offering it, and then having a hard time receiving that gratitude. I have a couple of hypotheses, but I don't know if I'm the expert in this answer. So I'll just offer my hypotheses. There is a Hasidic teaching that many of you have heard at this point, that we are supposed to live with 2 truths in our pockets. Oh, I sound pretty echoey. I wonder if I need to be remuted. Here, I'm gonna, Judy, I see I saw you unmute. I'll unmute you. I'll re-unmute you in a moment so you can share your thought. That we're supposed to live with these 2 truths in our pockets, right? One, that the world is made for us, and the other, that we are but dust and ashes. And I think we sometimes, like, that balance is off sometimes. And I think gratitude, we hear gratitude and we think, oh, but we're supposed to be humble. I think that that's one reaction. And so one thing that happens sometimes to us is that when we are given such a clear understanding of a thing that we have done that is good, it is a reminder that we are supposed to be humble. So our reaction to that positivity is to push back against that positivity, because it is a reminder of the need for humility sometimes, which is an interesting thing. I also think that it's an uncomfortable, I think we have some discomfort around feeling good about ourselves. Not always, but some of us. And that one you got to ask a trained psychologist about. But I think that's, I have experienced that with others. I experienced that with myself, that we have some trouble feeling good about ourselves. And when someone kind of throws goodness at us in deep and meaningful ways, or even in very basic ways, we are thus prone to like deflect, right? Like, don't make me feel good about myself. That's an awkward feeling. I feel awkward. And we don't like feeling awkward. And so rather than like absorb that and feel that awkwardness that's internalized as part of what it means to be told you've done something well, we deflect. I also think that it has to do, I will also say on a personal note, sometimes my ability to receive gratitude has to do with judgments I'm making about the other person's ability to be grateful for that thing, or whether or not their gratitude counts, which is a terrible thing. This is a terrible thing to say. I will admit it, however. And I've talked to Cantor Mary about this too. So I'll speak not on her behalf, but as somebody it's a conversation we've had. When we are praised for things we don't think are difficult for us, we downplay whether or not it should be something we receive gratitude for. I don't know if that makes sense. And when we are praised, when I am praised for something that it seems clear to me I actually did not do well by my own standards, I also deflect that when I should or shouldn't, maybe. And I'm seeing head nods, so it's nice to know I'm not alone in those in those moments. But I think both of those are kind of very human things that those of us who shake our heads yes are not alone in. This challenge of hearing someone's blessing and taking away all of the things that we put on that person or on that blessing or on ourselves, taking all of that and just like pushing it to the side and simply saying, thank you, or you're welcome, which is a phrase that I read a really interesting article at some point. My generation has lost you're welcome as a phrase, it seems, according to this article. And we are prone to no problem or no worries, which negates that somebody has taken the time to say thank you in the first place. So there was a time when I was trying very hard to say you're welcome. I think I've fallen down on the job. So you have to hold me to that. Next time you say thank you for something and I say no problem, say no, Rabbi, you have to say you're welcome. I'll work on that as well. And Janice, yeah, the idea of it is my pleasure. I love that as well. Sometimes it's not my pleasure though. So you're welcome is sometimes maybe better than it is my pleasure. And sometimes it is my pleasure. And that's another good response. And I just want to highlight also what Janice just wrote, that I never feel like I live up to my standards in what I do. My standards are awfully high. I think we often have I think our standards for ourselves are often higher than for others. And that's another good check for ourselves is like when we internally say something to ourselves that we would never say to a friend who is going through the same thing. It's a good catch to perhaps treat ourselves as well as at least we would treat the people who we love most dearly, because we do well to love ourselves as much as we love those we love dearly. Yeah. I'm seeing that we are at almost noon, and so I want to hand this over to whoever it is that manages the next piece of this. It is Bob. It's always Bob. I'm going to hand this back over to Bob with gratitude to all of you for giving me an opportunity to talk about gratitude and remind me of all of these components of what gratitude is all about, because without the excuse to talk about it, I am prone to forget these things as much as anybody else. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you all today.
Wonderful clergy, period. All of you and the support that you give us, which is wonderful. And especially to you, thank you. We are so grateful for you, Rabbi.
I agree.
And also, what I'm grateful for is all these wonderful people who are on this Zoom, because they are Spice, and it's such a pleasure to work with them and on their behalf. And bless you all. Have a wonderful end of Hanukkah, and have a happy secular New Year. And we look forward to seeing you in this January. And Natalie, if you could put us into some breakout groups, I'm sure we'd like to keep talking.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Natalie, for making it all possible.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank